Welcome to our latest edition of CharitEpulse, our bi-weekly charity podcast. My name is Charles Mosquita, Charities Director at Quilter Cheviot Investment Management. I'm delighted to be joined by my regular musketeers, Catherine Ross-Jomji, leading charity legal beagle at Shakespeare Martineau, and James Saunders, charity partner at leading accountancy and audit firm Moore Kingston Smith. Welcome, guys.
Hello, Charles.
Together, we explore the latest pressing issues affecting the not-for-profit and voluntary organisations. Don't forget, you can catch us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and on our various websites. And we'd love to have feedback, so please send us comments and questions. I have to say, it's been a very, very busy few weeks since we last met. So we've had Trump visit the Middle East and come back with a $400 million plane, which is for his library. It's going to be a big library. He also met with the president of Syria. Putin, surprisingly, didn't turn up for peace talks in Turkey. And Trump's liberation tariffs appear to be running into a brick wall. And Starmer is having a European reset. And also, closer to home, we've had cybercrime both at M&S and the Co-op, which may come up. Now, the first thing I spotted was the Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office has put out a statement that they're going to maintain 0.7 aid pledge after Minister's global charity remarks criticised by Development Minister Baroness Chapman. I don't know if, James, you've always have quite a lot of views on what's going on with the overseas aid and some of the remarks.
Yeah, this was Baroness Chapman, who said the days of viewing the UK government as a global charity were over, and that the government should start becoming a partner rather than acting in paternalism. I mean, I was saying earlier, I think that these comments say more about the person than it does about the sector. I think this is extremely, I'm frankly ignorant comments about what the sector does. I don't think that the sector would recognise anything to do with paternalism in the last several years, if not decades. I mean, the amount of grant funding that is made to the wider world through FCDO historically, and is genuinely seen as an investment rather than a handout. I mean, it's been enormous these last few years. And I was gobsmacked really by that comment, and I think like I say, it doesn't represent the international grant-making sector at all.
Catherine?
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether it was clickbait, dog whistle, or something else, but it stood out to me as being a typical reform-esque kind of headline, that if, for those that don't understand this, they'd assume we spend too much overseas and we should spend it in the UK. And I did just wonder, is she chasing a headline for that and trying to appeal to the general masses by an uninformed statement generally?
Charles, the aid spending cuts earlier this year, and Annalisa Dodds resigned because of it. A senior minister resigned because of the Labour government's decision. And I just feel that comments like this, it's just one side of a coin. It's terrible, really. And getting back up to 0.7, okay, that's quite a nice target to get back to, but we're going from 0.3%. I mean, it's of gross national income. It's not saying much.
Yeah, and we should remind everybody that it was cut, wasn't it, from 0.5% to 0.3, and the 0.7 was a manifesto pledge by the Labour Party before they came into power. The one thing that always amuses me, and I have to say, because I didn't know who Baroness Chapman was, I'm sure you did, Catherine, because she was a local MP. Anyway, having a quick look on Wikipedia, so she was MP for Darlington from 2010 to 2019, where she lost out to the Conservatives. But prior to that, she had been the office manager for Alan Milband's constituency office. So it does slightly amuse me that for 9 years you're an MP and then you get put up to House of Lords. I wonder what we have to do to get ourselves ennobled. Anyway, Now, I did have an email through from somebody asking about whether they should do governance reviews and how they should go about it, and whether they should have somebody independently conducting it. And I thought, I'm going to float this, because as it happens, for one of the charities I'm involved with, we are going through a governance review at the moment, and we have just had a report come back. And then I picked out some of the findings. And the first one was around the composition of the board. And here, with this particular charity, we are quite medical heavy, although very eminent medical professionals. Catherine, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Yes, so far so good practice, normal, exactly what I would do. I think composition of the board is a typical one. I think it's sometimes easier for someone externally to say what they see, and they might well be saying what you already know, that we've perhaps got a glut of trustees all from the same mindset, all from the same background, and wouldn't that be better to mix it up a bit and have different composition on that board? I think sometimes it is the skills, sometimes it's the numbers as well, isn't it? You're saying it's too small, too big, people that need to move on, they've been there too long. So I think composition of the board, sometimes I think that's much easier for someone who doesn't have skin in the game to be able to make those remarks than it does to say it from within.
Yeah, the other areas that they brought up was term limits for trustees, and whether those should be enshrined in the constitution, and also term limits for patrons, presidents, ambassadors, and should you have terms and conditions of what your expectation is. Where do you sit on that, James? Have you come across that?
Well, it's very interesting with the Centre Barley case at the moment going on, when you talk about founders and that sort of thing. I mean, it's very difficult to say there should be term limits for founders, because you're always going to be the founder, aren't you? Well, I was interested, actually, Charles, whether these are recommendations or whether they are just suggestions to look at with some of these things. Establish a vice chair role. Well, was that a suggestion in your case, or was it just is this a sensible role that would be useful? Because it strikes me these things being, any sort of best practice, ignores the circumstances of the charity.
So, I mean, in the report itself, it definitely sets out that this is the consultant's recommendation to the board.
Oh, it's really dangerous. I don't know. What do you need a vice chair for?
Here, Catherine, what about
I love a vice chair. It's always in my
okay, let's put it this way. What do you
recommendation.
definitely need a vice chair for? That's
I always call it a deputy. I'd say a deputy chair is very much not a chair in waiting. You've got
and it's not a chair of vice, then, is it? Is that
No, because I said vice once, and a woman took me to task massively at my offensive use of language. So please note, I have learnt my lesson. So yeah, deputy chair, I think better, because it's more that kind of team management. I think sometimes if it's personalities and somebody has an issue communicating with the chair, then it can be easy for the deputy to be a team player and talk to other trustees. I think they can give more of a different view, a different role, share the load, but also make sure that they're also cracking the whip to get the rest of the board, I suppose, to do what they need to be doing, rather than it all resting on the chair. And I just think it stops the power being held too much in one person, rather than spread, and remembering that it's a board overall.
I mean, the interesting point, because I raised it, and my automatic assumption, wrongly, was that this was the succession planning from going from deputy to chair, which I think you're right about using the correct title for it. But this was very much so for people who didn't want to be chair, but actually had a lot to add. And I'm still, I suppose, trying to think about what their role and purpose would be.
Well, both of your comments actually are quite interesting. I was reading an article the other day about the role of the chair, and actually, Catherine, I know you said the word power, but actually, the chair shouldn't have power at all. The chair is just the focal representative of the trustees, and a chair that does think they have power and a deciding vote and all that sort of thing actually can be a bit of a problem, can't it?
Yeah, but I think a deputy can help to nip that in the bud, stop it before it happens, gives you more of a spread. I think it helps with your succession planning as well. I would agree that some people might say, yeah, I'd be good as a deputy, because that's a sort of team player, you know, working with the newer trustees, making sure they're happy, giving some feedback to the chair, you know, being that listening person, rather than having to be the one that kind of runs the meetings themselves as the chair. So I think it is a very different skill set, but I think it can just help to make sure you don't end up with too much emphasis on the chair.
Yeah, I think I think the problem with the chair needs to show leadership, and people will look to that, but they need to use their leadership as they are one amongst equals. But also, going back into your constitution, James, you will have a number of charities that will have the deciding vote will be if you
okay, yeah, no.
So,
sorry, I said deciding vote. I didn't mean, I meant more. It's my final decision.
Yeah, no, and
which can happen.
And I think there are some chairs that can see it very much so on a, I suppose, like a corporate, where you've got a chief executive and chair, and then handing down edicts, which is not the way that it should work. Just on term limits, what are your thoughts on that? Now, I know in the governance code they have 9 years, and that is because there has been research done on into non-executives, and that is seen as the time period of where they will be independent before it gets groups speak. But I'm not sure that's the same with charities. What would your views be? Catherine, why don't we start with you?
I always put a term of office. I don't always put a term limit. And I say that it should never be presumed that somebody is going to be reappointed. So stop thinking of, we only need to think about this after 9 years. You need to think about it every single time that person's 3-year term, if it is 3 years, every single time that comes to an end, you need to think about what skills, knowledge, experience does the charity require at this point? Does this individual still offer that? In which case, then let's take a vote on whether they are reappointed, but you actually do it as a decision, not a rolling over. I think there's too much of this assumed that you're reappointed every single time, and that's why you end up with the cap needing to be enforced, rather than don't wait for it at that point. You should be thinking about whether somebody is as effective as a trustee as you hoped they would be, and whether their skills are still what you need going forward, and they might well be for beyond the 9 years. So that's why I don't always put that cap in there, but I would put a term of office.
And would you put a cap at any length of time period?
Not necessarily, because I'd be saying to them, exercise your powers at every break point, if you like. Stop waiting for that hard break to make the decision for you.
James?
Yeah, I mean, I said to you before, Charles, I have a policy of not arguing with Catherine when she's right, and she's right. So not much more to add, really. Well, I know that there's no need for any long cap at all. I think I've got clients who have very similar trustees for many years, and they are personal charities. That it's the circumstances, isn't it? Not necessarily. You can't have generic rules, I don't think.
Yeah, I have to say, I had the situation about a month ago where I'd realized I'd been on the board for about 11 years, and I had turned around to the board and said, listen, I'm now going to step out of the room, and you've got to decide whether you want me to continue or not, and have a conversation. And I have to say, they said, oh, don't worry, it will only be a couple of minutes. Well, about 5 minutes later, I was thinking, oh gosh, what conversation's going on? Of course, you go back in. Not only have they said they want me to stay as a trustee, but they then made me chair as well at the same time.
And this is the key, isn't it, Charles? It's not having the rules; it's having the capacity to talk about it. It's exactly as Catherine said. Yeah. If you need to have there will be a discussion about this, fine, but you can't. I don't think you should cap the length of term. I think you should just be aware that it could be a challenge. Some circumstances change again. Look at that Centre Barley one. It's changed enormously over the course of whatever it is, 15, 20 years. And because of the changing circumstances, the governance arrangements haven't been fit to deal with the changes. That's the danger. You've got to be aware of your own governance arrangements and where problems might arise.
But I think Catherine is right. I think having a formal process of which over every 3 or 4 years or whatever it is, you do sit down and do it. The other thing I do, which is a bit symbolic, is that when I get appointed as a trustee, I give a sealed envelope to the chair of trustees, which is my letter of resignation, and tell them to exercise it at any time where they think I've become difficult, useless, whatever you'd like to term it on. Anyway, and the other thing I thought was interesting, I just talking about trustees and limits, was in pro bono economics survey that they've done with the research they've done with the Charity Commission is that only 6% of trustees applied for their role via an advert. Do you think that should change?
Yeah, it does suggest that there's not a very open approach in many cases, doesn't it? That is a strange stat, and one that I think probably is worth looking at more.
Catherine?
I don't know, I mean, I get it. When I see it like that, I think, oh, that seems bad. And yet, I absolutely detest being asked to complete an application form to apply for a trustee role and a covering letter to go with it, explaining what I'm going to bring to the role. And I just think it's not a job that I'm applying for. You can get too corporate with it, and I hate that. It should be about what's her personality like, what's her motivation like, how does she communicate with others, what's the person actually like, rather than doing it by application, which, let's face it, you could get AI to draft it anyway and do a marvelous written application if you wanted to. So yeah, I don't know. I don't necessarily like the tap on the shoulder, but I think there's so much more at stake with a board of trustees. It's much more fragile, actually, about is somebody going to be a monster when they become a trustee, whereas they looked great on paper. I just don't know.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because the Charity Commission have just published or updated their guidance, refreshed it, of finding and appointing new trustees, the CC 30. I have to say, I have printed up, I haven't read it, but I agree with you. I think we need to be very careful about how we deal with this and allow charities to do what works for them best, because I certainly wouldn't apply for, and I don't like the feeling that it's a job interview, because this is when you have a conversation with a potential new trustee, it should be a two-way dialogue, and it's as much about the chemistry as it's about the skill set. The other thing that was interesting, Catherine, you'll be very pleased to hear that the one area that was identified as a lacking in trustees was the legal profession. There are not enough lawyers on.
Rubbish, complete rubbish. I cannot believe it made it in there. I thought, is this sponsored by a law firm? It's ridiculous to think that having a lawyer on your board is your panacea. Why pick lawyer randomly? I was thinking, why are you not picking accountant? Why are you not saying need someone with finance or fundraising? Or I just thought it was a nonsense. Not all.
I think accountants are two a penny. That's the problem.
Oh, okay.
But I agree with you. That to me was quite lazy thinking, because I think there are certain skills you need on a board, but actually we shouldn't, because the rationale behind it was that they were having to go out and get external advice on it. Well, actually, if you've got a problem, you probably don't want the trustee sorting it out and giving free advice, because they're not going to apply the same thing. It doesn't. Yeah, I have to.
No, because there's no engagement terms. These professional services these days, you've got to have engagement terms and everything in place. You really don't want advice from a volunteer lawyer. That's really not a good idea. Common sense oversight is one thing, but detailed technical advice, because solicitors are so specialized these days. Catherine, I don't know, what would you want to be? Would you want to talk about property law?
Well, exactly not. I often say that to the charities I am a trustee on. I'm such a letdown as far as legal advice goes, because I specialise in charity law and governance. I cannot tell you about litigation, data protection, employment disputes, all the juicy stuff. I just think, well, don't look at me. It's not my area. I can give you a kind of, this is what I think, this is my general take on it, but it's not the same as having your own mini lawyer available to advise on every single area possible for free. That's not what we're there for.
I agree with that. So going back to the original request about governance reviews, although we're not complete through the process, I think it's been very interesting. I think, as Catherine, as you've said, it highlights a lot of things that we probably already know, but it's helped us focus on it. I was expecting the report to be a bit more forthright, actually, if I'm really honest. But I don't know whether that's me being having too much expectation towards what was going to happen, but it's been a very interesting exercise. So the other thing I spotted was and the usual annual charity giving by the UK wealthiest is up 500 million, Sunday Times giving list shows. James, do you want to start with this one?
Oh, do I want to start with this? It's damn lies and statistics, isn't it? It's very difficult to really keep track of what these huge numbers really mean. Your the article that you were looking at, Charles, it was Neil Heslop from CAF. His comments are quite interesting, and they're usually a decent summary of what the stats say, if you like. But I mean, the big takeaway really is that the hedge fund owners, if you like, have obviously had a good year somehow, and the money they're giving, it dwarfs anything else really. The biggest hedge fund manager, what's that? 983 million donated to charitable causes in the year. Then percentage of his wealth, he comes in at third place. It's very difficult. It seems there's more being given, but like everything else at the moment, it seems that the charitable donations in a year are pretty much related to performance of the world economy.
Catherine?
I mean, I don't want to be a pedant about the language, but I think it's when I read articles that say high net worth individuals, da 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 da, but then you start seeing other articles saying actually anybody earning above what, 50K is you're in the top certain proportion of earners, you are a high earner, whether you think it, feel it or not. And I think this is the mega wealthy, the ultra they're like unicorns, aren't they? Surely this is a different realm. And I think you putting off average people from giving, if you then start saying, well, actually, why should I? If all these multimillionaires are not doing it, I'm not going to bother myself. And I think
you're absolutely right,
put it
Catherine.
down.
It's not real, is it? It's not real money.
Yeah.
I mean, when a guy's worth 8.15 billion and he gives 983 million to charities, how does that relate to the normal person? They mentioned some of the pop stars in the list, Harry Styles and Elton John. I mean, their wealth is dwarfed by some of these hedge fund managers. It's still completely unrelatable to most people. And the phrase is often used as ultra high net worth individuals these days, Catherine, and mega high net worth individuals, so you can classify them. But I'm not really sure how it really relates to anything.
And just to put that into perspective, the top 100 wealthiest people in the UK, according to the Sunday Times, gave 3.7 billion, which was obviously up $500 million from last year. But it was the Neil Heslop, CEO of CAF, saying if they gave 1% of their investable assets, actually that would be 19.9 billion per year. I think there's a more.
So does that mean, Charles? Does that mean that basically the charity sector should just give up with everything other than the ultra high net worth individuals, concentrate on that, and gain 19.9 billion, whereas the rest of the I don't, I'm not quite sure what this is all saying.
Absolutely not, because I think everybody needs to be part of this, because it's, I mean, if you go back to why people want to be trustees, it's that feeling of being part of a community, giving back, doing something good, etc. I think this is all part of it. I think what this is looking at, where there's been, we've had the previous chair of the Charity Commission talking about philanthropy, we've had the government talking about philanthropy and how we encourage it. And they look to the US of way of doing things. I know it's different here, is how do we get more people doing it? How do we make it easier? How do we make it something that people want to do? And I suspect that is the driving. I mean, yeah, the Sunday Times doing it because it's big numbers and you can talk about hedge funds leading the list or whatever. But I suspect that is the underlying thing. I think it would be more of a takeaway that I would be taking from it. The other thing I spotted was that UK legacy income grows to 4.5 billion as probate backlog clears. There we are, Catherine. You do quite a lot of that within Shakespeare Martineau, don't you?
Well, yeah, there again, within Shakespeare Martineau, yes, I have colleagues I could ask that do know about this stuff. But yeah, I think it's more, good news, isn't it, that the backlog is being cleared. There are lots of charities who are accounting for legacies, being notified of it maybe 2 years ago, but not having the money landing, makes such an issue for them if they've got they need that money, they're going to use that money, but it's not arrived yet. So it can only be a good thing. And I think there is huge scope for more legacies to the charity sector. I thought you were going to mention Liam Payne died without making a will, and the number of people are saying, how much do people have to earn before they realize you need to make a will, and that you should have had some charitable giving in there. And I think that's where, again, the piece about legacies is people should realize how tax efficient it is and useful for people to be able to, reduce their tax liability and support charities at the same time.
Well, this is the whole thing, isn't it? Around, I think about my profession of financial advisors that are going to be, where they're having that conversation around inheritance tax planning. A lot of them just don't know about charitable giving and how it works or anything else. So you're starting from a very low base, and you just think actually a simple thing to resolve that is make it part of the educational program that they have to do to pass their exams. I think that's things. Now, the final thing I spotted, I thought this, James, I'm not sure whether you've had a close look at this, but there was a headline about concerns over 22 million in cash checks sparks investigation into 10 charities by the Charity Commission, of which, admittedly, when I looked at it, seemed to be predominantly Jewish charities. Have you had a look at this?
It's an investigation that started, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I've always said, on our podcast, there's nothing inherently wrong with using cash. In certain parts of the world, it's necessary to take cash, to get. Now that I always appreciate that goes against the history of fraud can happen with cash, but it's always been, you've got to have controls over your cash. You've got to know where your weaknesses are with cash. As you said earlier, Charles, as you mentioned on the cyber security point, M&S, and nothing's faultless at the moment. But the cash point, it'll be interesting to see what the results of this were. There's nothing inherently wrong with using cash, but 22 million in cash flying around it's a big number. It will be interesting to see how it's justified, what it's used for, whether there are the right controls in place, and there's nothing going missing. I mean, that's I think probably all you can say at the moment.
Yeah, because I couldn't work out exactly what the whole investigation was about. Was it because it was one company was distributing the cash, or was it because a whole lot of charities were taking out cash, and then what were they doing with it? Catherine, did you have a look at this?
I did look at it, couldn't get my head around it at all. I was like, I don't understand in the slightest, don't follow. Lots of checks, lots of money, who's doing what, I don't understand. And I hate articles like that. I just think, what are you trying to tell me? I don't know. Couldn't understand.
But I sort of actually, it goes back, doesn't it, for the challenge for a regulator that's announcing there's an investigation. They've obviously stopped whatever's been going on from going on just while they investigate, but they can't actually explain what they're investigating until they've investigated, I assume, is where we are.
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult. It was HMRC were getting involved again, and we've said in previous episodes, HMRC are far more involved, it seems, in looking at what charities are doing with money and cash. I mean, I've noticed in the last few weeks a lot more gift aid investigations being reported on, and people getting found guilty of gift aid fraud, in particular frauds in general. But there does seem to be a real renewed activity from HMRC, and this is part of it, I think.
Well, we shall have to watch this space and see what happens. Thank you, James. Thank you, Catherine. Say we live in interesting times would once again be an understatement. Thank you for listening. We would love to hear if you have any questions, have any comments, feedback, would like to cover any particular topics. Please do let us know. Do share with friends and families. According to our friends at Truth Social, this is the only charity podcast worth listening to.